Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and today, once again, you see that I have the infamous scene of Jesus Christ ejecting the moneylenders and the livestock traders from the Temple of Jerusalem. And considering the topic for today, which is the secret key to facing our demons, you can see that there is a connection between last week's live stream and this week's. Because when we speak of the allegory of Jesus ejecting the moneylenders and livestock traders, we are considering the story, the archetype of they who do not belong, that which sullies the sanctity of the house of God in this particular example. The actions, the behaviors which degenerate, which pollute that which should be pure, that which should be immaculate. And we all have that which we consider defects, excuse me, or vices. We all have accumulated bad habits, conditioned behaviors, or beliefs, thought patterns, automatic mechanical reactions, all manner of behaviors that affect us in our daily lives, which we know on one level or another that they do not serve us. And they do not serve to improve our lives, and they certainly don't serve to improve the lives of others. These weaknesses, these shortcomings, whatever it is you want to call them, they are all products of algorithms that are running in our subconscious mind, which come and affect our conscious mind and our conscious experience. Or, conversely, they pull the wool over our eyes and condition our consciousness and subject our consciousness to erroneous filters of belief, erroneous filters of fantasy, of illusion, of hypnosis, and of ignorance that cause us to not be able to discern correctly that which belongs and that which does not belong, that which is out of place, that which pollutes the sanctity of our temple, which, if you are here, it's because you long, on some level of your being, you long to sanctify, to purify your temple, to make it a house of God, a vessel worthy of receiving your innermost Lord and Master. This is what every servant longs to do, that who is a professional servant whose vocation is to serve. You think of those great butlers, the head of the household in film, that archetype. You can think of Alfred from the Batman series, or um, other. There's Anthony Hopkins played the master of the house in the film Remains of the Day. It's back in late 80s. And in fact, there was a film far more recent. Forrest Whitaker played the lead in a film called The Butler. And it was all about a man whom served as essentially the head of staff of the White House. Now, not the political arm, the actual White House. The what you would call that, the domestic arm of the United States. Um, and he served as the butler for I don't know how many presidents. He was the head of the household. He was the head of the White House. He ran the goings on, everything from secret meetings and cabinet meetings to family gatherings and birthdays, all the way to state dinners and hosting foreign leaders and kings and queens from other countries. I mean, this is it's a very important role. It's a very important job to manage the goings on of a great house, of a house which serves a greater purpose. And so it is a very noble vocation. It's not a profession, it is a vocation to be a butler, or what's the female equivalent of that? Well, the head mistress, I suppose, of the house, or anyway, whoever, that person who is the senior wait staff of the house and is responsible for the management of the domestic affairs of the house. It is truly a vocation. It is a calling to serve. And if we think about our own mortal vessel as a house of God, as its own White House, and if we meditate on who is meant to preside over that house and within this house, then we ask ourselves, is our house in order? Is our house in its present state? Is it worthy of receiving the president of our White House? Do we have our house in order that the Lord and Master of the house may enter and preside over it and conduct his affairs here on the terrestrial plane? Or are there elements which currently preside over our house which do not belong, which pollute it, which sully it, and which cause the goings on of this house of ours to fall into a state of disrepair, to fall into a state of neglect, or to be preoccupied with enterprises of vanity, enterprises of unimportance to our Lord and Master, but they constitute projects that we spend our time and energy on. Instead of maintaining the state of our house and getting our house in order so that our Lord and Master may preside and conduct his affairs unobstructed. And when I say Lord and Master, of course, I'm referring to our higher self, our true self, our innermost being, who is an individuated essence of God, our own innermost intimate Christ. But we know from our experience, we know from our intuition and from our conscience, if we observe ourselves, if we are mindful throughout the day, our interactions with others, but also just the thought processes and the emotional processes taking place within us. We know that there are elements, there are behaviors, there are thoughts, there are patterns which obstruct and which wreak havoc on what we know to be right and what we know to be proper. And these shortcomings or weaknesses, vices or defects, or whatever, by whatever name we call them, they are individual to you. Each and every one of us has our own unique set of foibles and defects and weaknesses and Achilles' heel, to use an ancient allegory. That which, to the best of our efforts, we can't seem to shake, that we can't seem to overcome. But overcome them we must. Because, again, a man cannot have two masters. And the Lord and Master of the house can hardly return and preside over his house if it's filled with squatters. And this is precisely what the allegory of Jesus ejecting the moneylenders and the livestock traders from the temple represents. Because they are using the temple. They are exploiting the temple and the feast of Passover for profit. They are fleecing the worshipers coming to the temple to give offerings and make sacrifices. And these supposed businessmen who are supposedly offering a, quote, valuable service to the parishioners, to the worshipers, attempting to partake in the feast of Passover, they are all taking their generous cut. And let us not forget that the Pharisees themselves are getting their share, their cut of every transaction, of every exchange that's taking place in the house of God. And so, in that light, when we observe ourselves and we recognize our shortcomings and our weaknesses and those bad habits that we cannot seem to shake, and in some cases, we may even have more than bad habits. We may have bona fide addictions, behaviors that not only can we not shake them, we can't stop indulging them. Behaviors which we find compulsive in nature. We must do them. Substances that we are addicted to, or other impressions that we are addicted to, other pastimes, or what have you. Addiction is a very broad category. There are many activities, actions, and behaviors that can fall under the umbrella of addiction. It's not just substances or food or whatever. There are many different things that we take into our consciousness that can result in an addiction. And there are also, we might say, more subtle behavioral phenomena, again, that rear their ugly head when we are triggered in certain ways, certain people, circumstances, and all of a sudden something arises within us, seemingly out of nowhere, and we find ourselves reacting out of fear, out of anger, out of disgust, contempt. And we may find ourselves reacting to people and circumstances in ways that are entirely uncharacteristic of us. And yet, if we have been observing ourselves, and if we retrospect on our life, as difficult and as painful as it may be, to recall other circumstances, similar circumstances, when we have reacted in such ways, in ways that we're not proud of, when we've reacted in ways where after the fact, when we have calmed down and we have more clarity and perspective as to what's happening, we might have even said to ourselves, what possessed me to do that? What possessed me to react that way? What possessed me to say that? What possessed me to behave so uncharacteristically? That wasn't me. That's not me. I'm not like that. And yet, in that particular instance, well, we were precisely like that. We were precisely that way. These are, in their totality, as a group of phenomena, what we might refer to as our demons. And that is precisely why the expression, what possessed me to do that, exists, because demons' modus operandi is to possess, is to dominate for the sake of exploitation. It's to momentarily take over or to insert themselves into a situation or inject themselves between ourselves and others, between circumstances and our objective conscious experience of them. They are, in essence, very much like the money lenders and the livestock traders who are middlemen. They are there to, quote, offer a service. Because, of course, like all salesmen, like all middlemen who exploit a system and take their cut off the top, they are there, they present themselves as being on your side. They are there for you. They have your best interests at heart. And in theory, that's the case. And in practice, yeah, is, for example, lawyers, for example, in practice, they might be able to get you off the hook. They might be able to reduce your sentence. They might be able to, get your payout from the insurance company. They might be able to achieve monetarily or practically what it is that your objective is. But these people don't work for charity. And if they do win an award of some kind for you, monetarily wise, they will take a large chunk, a large percentage of that as their fee, as their finder's fee, right? Because they are the middleman. They got in between you and whatever it is you were facing in the legal system. And there's that old joke, what do you call 100,000 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean, right? A good start. And there's a reason why lawyers have this reputation. But all middlemen, all exploitative type activities have this sort of duality about them. Even, right, spiritual gurus and self-help gurus, they get on and, or even pastors, charismatic pastors, Southern Baptists and whatnot. These that they care so much for their flock. They care so much for you and your salvation. But they never forget to pass around, the donation basket. And some of these pastors live in the lap of luxury. Some of them, like Joel Osteen, he lives in a 25,000 square foot mansion with a helicopter pad. It's worth $25 million. So when we talk about facing our demons, we need to understand their modus operandi, what they are and why they exist, and what their purpose is, and how they go about interjecting themselves into our lives, and then what happens as a result of that. And we don't have to get too deep into the weeds, because on a certain level, we should all know this. If we've observed ourselves, if you are aware you have defects and vices, if you are aware of these so-called demons of yours, then each one will have a slightly different approach and a slightly different flavor of temptation, if that's the case. Or in the case of those which rear their ugly head in the moment, in a flash, where you have no warning, and it's just they're triggered, and all of a sudden they're in your face, and you are they've gripped you. You're in its grips. You're possessed by anger, by rage, by frustration, by whatever it is. And then and you're watching yourself say things and do things which are uncharacteristic of you, and which certainly you're going to regret moments later. And yet in the moment, you're gripped, and you're possessed by that rage, or by that fear or frustration, or whatever the case may be, right? Or envy, or gluttony, or what have you. So there's another word that we use, of course, to describe these algorithms, these mechanical programs that exist in our psychology. These you can think of them as AI algorithms, or psychological viruses, mind viruses. They're like entities, and we can call them egos. Christians call them sins. And we know about the 7 deadly sins, right? Uh, Pride, lust, rage, gluttony, sloth, etc. So we know we have these weaknesses. And if we've been observing ourselves, we know that the reason why we know we have these weaknesses is because we've witnessed ourselves succumbing to them for years. Not all the time necessarily, unless it's some kind of an addiction or an obsession, or something very prominent. Like if you have anger management issues, then you might you might be subjected to outbursts of anger and frustration, and disdain for others all the time. You might be in a constant state of perturbation, in which it's very, very difficult for you to have a moment's peace, because everything that you see, everything that you encounter, seems to trigger some kind of a negative reaction, some kind of a anger-based reaction. Right? It all depends. Everyone's different, and everyone lives with different levels of of subjectivity, of these mechanical algorithmic reactions, and the intensity and frequency of their influence on our lives depends entirely on the degree of our past infractions, because that's where our so-called demons come from. We create them. We created them. Because the point of their existence, their purpose, is to teach us. Now, we want to parse that out and understand that a demon doesn't want to teach you. A demon doesn't want to teach us. Fear has no interest in teaching us. It has every interest in conditioning us, in controlling us, dominating us, and exploiting us, and feeding on our energy, and hypnotizing our consciousness. That's what its interest is, because it's wholly mechanical and it's running a program. And just like any machine, it wants to exist. It wants to run. It wants to run. And to run, it needs two things. It needs energy to operate, and it needs inputs and outputs. Essentially, it needs an operator. But from our perspective, or rather, the perspective of our innermost Lord and Master, from the perspective of God, from the perspective of our Divine Mother, who is the divine feminine aspect of our innermost essence. She is that energy, that divine feminine nurturing energy, which furnishes us and provides us with all we need in our life and all we need on our journey. From her perspective, we need to be able to see and comprehend the nature of our past infractions in order to be able to progress, in order to be able to learn our lessons, so to speak, to learn what it is inside of us which causes us suffering and caused us to bring about suffering for others. We need to understand what is polluting the house of God inside of us and know what they're doing and how they're doing it. And for that, right, we must confront our demons. And we must confront them from that perspective. We must confront them as Jesus confronts the moneylenders and the livestock traders. In that rare, infamous scenario where Jesus shows what appears to be borderline anger, but is really just the ferocity of the Christ, the severity of love. Tough love, in other words. This is not an enterprise for the faint of heart. This is not a process for the overly soft, for the hypersensitive. We have to grow a backbone in a very real metaphysical sense in order to confront our adversaries, to confront that which stands between us and the purification of the temple. Because our defects and vices, our demons, are what stand between us and our higher self. They are what keep us trapped in this present state of being, in this lower state of consciousness, and that keep us identified with the false self and the physical body, that prevent us from accessing the supernal worlds, and on and on and on it goes. Because in addition to everything that we've said, we can also add the analogy of the boat anchor, right? That which weighs us down, weighs heavily on our mind and our heart and our body, and prevents us from from rising up. That which makes us sink lower and lower and deeper into our own psychological hell. That's mass, that's weight. And again, we have that, even in the image behind me, you have the symbol of these hordes of money grubbing money lenders, right? And they're all jostling, and they're all, doing their thing, trying to get their cut. But it's they're you can just imagine 2,000 years ago, on a hot spring day. Just imagine, like, the bodies, and the sweat and the stench and the body odor, and the yelling, and the haggling, and just that whole, like, just picture the floor of the New York Stock Exchange 2,000 years ago. Everybody wearing, robes and togas and whatnot, eh, but behaving the same way, but in the temple, or at the very least in the courtyard of the temple. And then observe yourself and that busy mind that won't shut up, the anxious thoughts, the negative thoughts that arise anytime we're confronted with something that disturbs us, that perturbs us, that challenges us, and our mind starts going crazy. And so it's, we have our own little New York Stock Exchange going on in our minds, and in our hearts, and in our physical body, as we feel our central nervous system. They're moving into our sympathetic nervous system, into the fight or flight mode, and all of these different self-preservation instincts become activated, and all of a sudden we start tensing up, and we're making fists, and we feel our all our muscles contracting, and our heart beating faster, and our breath increasing, and our pulse going, and right, and these are all automatic mechanical reactions. And then you remember, but what about the serenity and the peace and the openness, right? And the solemnity and the sacredness of the space within the house of God, which we are responsible for maintaining. Benjamin says, Jesus cleansed the temple because it was sacred. The temple represented God's presence among his people, so corrupting it with commercial activity was a serious violation. Some also compare ancient temples, including Egyptian ones, to symbolic representations of the cosmos or the human body, which make the temple's desecration seem even more profound. While all that's true, Benjamin, what we're focusing on today is the allegorical power of that story. Everything that you mentioned there is significant, but it's significant for us because of its practical application. We are a temple, the microcosm, the microcosmos. Man is the universe in microcosm. The universe is sacred. It was created by God. But planets can fall, humanities can fall, and individuals can fall. And a humanity and a planet can fall in macrocosm because a human being can fall in microcosm. But the process is the same, and it takes on the same characteristics. So what is being described in the Bible as taking place in the temple, in the house of God for the Israelites, everything that defines that particular episode in the story of Jesus's life applies to us as individuals in microcosm. And these demons that we must confront are desecrating our temple in precisely the same way that the moneylenders and livestock traders were desecrating the temple, the actual temple. And just as Jesus ejects them from the temple, so too the Christ is the only force within us who can eject the moneylenders from our temple. But specifically, the feminine aspect of the Christ, our Divine Mother, because she has the power of creation and destruction, of manifest creation, because all of that is feminine in nature, right? Divine Mother Nature. So we must appeal to our Divine Mother in the assistance of confrontation with our confronting our demons, which is just another way of saying facing our demons. But we have to face them, because if we don't, then we're just going to continue the way we've been living all this time. And they're going to continue to rear their ugly head, and they're going to continue conditioning us and affecting our lives and ambushing us and affecting us and causing us suffering and others suffering. So the question then is, well, then what does it mean to face our demons? What is this confrontation? And how does it take place? Because you hear this phrase all the time. We have to face our demons, face your demons. But what does that even mean? How do you do it? Is it just a matter of watching them? I mean, you've been doing that your whole life, haven't you? So what have we been missing? I've told the story of Dr. Gabor Mate many times on this live stream. He is a psychiatrist from British Columbia, Canada, and he is the only private citizen who has received permission from the federal government to administer ayahuasca in a clinical setting for the purpose of treating individuals with severe addictions. Now, I say clinical setting. What I really mean is he has permission from the government to administer ayahuasca for therapeutic use, because he doesn't administer ayahuasca in a clinical setting, in a clinic. No, what he does is he takes patients in groups, small groups, up into the mountains of British Columbia, and he has them go through a traditional ayahuasca ceremony presided over by a shaman or a coriander. And the ayahuasca ceremony maintains all its traditional aspects. And the reason he does this is because Mother Ayahuasca, that brew, has the tendency to show people what they need to see. And very often it'll show people perhaps the last thing that they wanted to see, but nonetheless they needed to see it. And Mother Ayahuasca will do that, because Mother Ayahuasca will take you into your own psychological hell. Like all substances, ayahuasca takes you to the lunar astral plane, which is psychological hell. And with the proper preparation and the proper mental attitude, ayahuasca will take you on a so-called bad trip, but it's bad in air quotes because, of course, it's a good trip. It's a trip you need to take into the lower levels of your own psychological hell. And Mother Ayahuasca will introduce you to your demon, the one responsible for your severe addiction. And it is remarkable how effective it is. It is absolutely remarkable, the transformation that takes place in individuals once they have faced their addiction, once they have faced the true face of their addiction. Then they've come face to face with their demon that's responsible for their addiction, the demon of self-loathing that orchestrates whatever addiction that they suffer from, that they cannot break out of. Mother Ayahuasca will bring them face to face with the demon, and she will make it clear to them what they are facing. In other words, she orchestrates the confrontation. She puts it in your face. You can't hide from it. You can't run from it. You can't avoid it. It's in your face. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you see the source and the cause of all of your suffering and the suffering of your loved ones and those around you who have just been witnessing your self-destructive behavior through that addiction. And now here you are face to face with that demon. When people come out of their ayahuasca experience and they are utterly transformed, they see their addiction now in a completely different light and a whole different level. Up until now, they were victims of substance or whatever, and they were just, didn't have the willpower, or they had excuses and this and that. They were just like the stones skipping across the surface of the water. And ayahuasca takes that stone and plunges it deep into the depths. And then for the first time, they see how deep the water goes and the monster lurking down there. And once they do, um, Dr. Mate's success rate with clients is remarkable. It's higher than any other approach that anybody has to dealing with severe addictions. And Dr. Gabor Mate almost exclusively deals with severe addictions when we're talking about his addiction clients. This is what he has stumbled upon. And he stumbled upon it because he himself, together with his daughter, they also suffered from addiction. They were addicted to shopping, and they couldn't stop buying whatever it was that they needed to buy. Designer this, designer that, and it was a real problem for them. And Dr. Mate stumbled upon ayahuasca ceremony, and he experienced this, and it transformed his life. In my case, I I had been suffering from epilepsy, from seizures, and from the associated depression and um, and other related symptoms. It wasn't until I confronted that demon, or rather was confronted by that demon in the astral plane, that I understood its true nature and its modus operandi and how it works and how it possesses me and how it takes control and dominance over me, and its true nature as fear, pure fear, and the desire to control, and that it's a terrorist, and that it doesn't it's the hardest demon to face because it does not want to be faced. In the past, I've called fear the great chameleon, but I've also called it the great cephalopod, because if you know anything about octopi, you know that they are the absolute masters of camouflage in the oceans. Not only can they change their color, but they can change the texture of their skin. They can so blend in with the coral around them that they don't just blend in with color, they blend in with texture, so that the surface of their skin takes on the shape and the form and the texture of whatever coral or other rocks or other environmental surroundings that they want to blend into. All the while, they are predators. I mean, they eat fish, they eat other creatures. And so they will find a nice little nook, and they will change their form, and they will blend in to the background, and they will wait for an unsuspecting fish to, and then with lightning speed, they will come and grab their prey with their, the 8 legs, and they'll entangle them, and they have a very sharp beak with which they use to kill. That's very much how fear operates. If you've ever had a panic attack or anything remotely like that, if you have any kind of phobia, or perhaps you were going to do some public speaking or go on radio or television or something, and then moments before you were to step out on stage, you suddenly were overcome and overwrought with stage fright. And it's sudden and it's immediate and it grabs you like suddenly, like a terrorist attack. Alternatively, we can have a very long, prolonged case of anxiety that stretches for days, for weeks, for months, for years. And that's us being in the grips of fear and being slowly consumed by it over a very long period of time. Benjamin says, and octopi can slip through very narrow spaces. They're the best escape artists. Well, yeah, and last but not least, they have this ability to squirt ink, and they can create a cloud of ink to obstruct their escape. So like a smoke screen underwater. But you're right. They are, because they have no backbone, they have no bones of any kind. It is absolutely correct that they can squish down into incredibly narrow crevices, and their brain is it can change its form and shape. They're absolutely, you know what, they're almost alien in nature. They're so absolutely incredible creatures. And so for myself, facing the demon was really a case of putting myself out there and as bait, and baiting the demon to come and reveal itself. Beaful says they also have 3 hearts. Now that's interesting. I'm not sure if I knew that. I don't think I knew that. That's a very interesting piece of information. And Beaful, welcome. That's a name that I do not recognize. So welcome. But you can see the importance of confronting that which, for lack of a better word, haunts us. And I say haunt because obviously there are times when we are possessed by these defects and vices, when we, in the moment, while we are triggered and we are overwrought and overcome with whatever it is. And maybe it's something as simple as, I don't know, binging on a bag of Oreo cookies. I mean, I can keep spitting out examples, but I really shouldn't have to. You know what you do that you're not proud of. You don't have to reveal it publicly. That's for you to know. That's between you and your higher self. But the point is that all of us have been living and dealing and coping with these defects and vices, these weaknesses of ours, our so-called demons, on this surface level. But to face them, to truly face them, we have to get beneath the surface. We have to get to their source. We have to get to the source, the heart of the matter. And depending on the nature of the demons we're talking about here, because there are degrees and there's levels. We may have to project into the astral plane and ask to see them face to face on that level. like the patients of Dr. Mate doing ayahuasca to see the demon of their addiction. Or in my case, to project into the astral and bait myself and be jumped by my demon and paralyzed by it in the astral plane, because that's exactly what a seizure is. Just imagine having a seizure in a dream, only the difference is you're actually being jumped and paralyzed by an actual demon. That's what confronting the demon of epilepsy in the astral plane is like. And that's how I came to understand and comprehend. I had multiple different experiences on the astral plane, of confrontations and half confrontations with the demon, and it was only through that experience that I came to comprehend its true nature. But for what we might just call run-of-the-mill weaknesses and defects and vices, anger, lust, or pride, we can confront them and face them at a deeper level than what we have been doing until now. And the title of today's live stream was The Secret Key to Facing Our Demons. The key, that secret key, is this. We are not qualified to face our demons. If there is one reason why this image is behind me, it's because of who is ejecting the moneylenders and the livestock traders from the temple. Who is doing that? Who is qualified to do that? You see, the problem with, much like last week, the mistake that people make manifesting is they leave out God and their higher self. And they do their affirmations like, I'm doing it. I am this. I am abundance. I am peace. I am tranquility. I am happiness. I am this. I am that. I. And the problem with the expression face your demons is that the people saying that are telling it to people, face your demons. And they're like, oh, okay, I have to face my demons. But who is the I in the image behind me? The I is the group of moneylenders and livestock traders. The I is the Pharisees who end up demanding Pontius Pilate to crucify Jesus as a direct result of him chasing the moneylenders and the livestock traders out of the temple. What is doing the ejecting here? What is doing the confrontation? What is doing the facing is the Christ. What does that mean for us practically? We know we have to face our demons, but we're not qualified to face them and confront them and eject them. So what am I talking about here? What is this? Sounds like a paradox. The key is, of course, to remain conscious, observant, aware in the moment when these demons come up from the depths of our subconscious mind to the surface, where they possess us or they do their automatic mechanical reactions that we find ourselves in the moment, and we're gripped by anger, we're gripped by frustration, by fear, by lust, by gluttony, but whatever it is, whatever we're talking about. But in that moment, to remain conscious and present. Now, if you can, invoke your higher self, invoke the power of God, invoke the power of your divine mother. Recognize which demon you're dealing with here. You have to know it. You have to discern. You have to be able to identify which demon it is. Is it fear? Is it lust? Is it greed? And remember that the demon of fear is a chameleon, the demon of fear can present itself on the surface as many other defects and vices, as many other egos. Frustration and anger and even lust and many other egos might actually have fear behind them. So how can we come to know that? By observing very carefully and completely, comprehensively, what is happening when I'm in the grips of that ego, when that demon is possessing me. What is happening in my heart? What is happening in my mind? What is happening in my body? What am I reacting to? What is triggering? Because remember, like attracts like and like triggers like. It's called entrainment, when one frequency triggers or causes the same frequency to vibrate. So someone playing a piano can strike a chord, and a nearby guitar string will start vibrating the same note, right? It's called entrainment. And this is what we experience in mob mentality and yeah, mob mentality and the behavior of crowds, right? When a crowd seems to take on a mind of its own. But of course, and it all becomes synchronized into whatever vibration it is at, right? That's one of the phenomena that charismatic leaders use in order to hypnotize masses, right? By getting lots of people together into one space and then getting them all, chanting or vibing on the same level. And then you get that to a point where they're all like hypnotized and mesmerized by that level. And at that point, they become open to suggestion. And they can be manipulated then as a whole, but many individuals taking on these new beliefs, these new identities, and these new directives by virtue of being part of this mob that's being manipulated by a very skilled, charismatic leader, and truly a black magician. So, with one eye in and one eye out, we can if we can identify, let's say we are reacting out of frustration or out of anger, but if we can discern the circumstance of the person that triggered us, that they were in a state of fear, and we were getting frustrated, but they were afraid, but their fear was frustrating us. And we were getting angry because they were afraid. Were we really angry in that moment? We were being triggered by them. Their fear was triggering us, but we seemed to be reacting with anger. This is what I mean about fear being the great chameleon. We know from Star Wars, we know from Yoda's teachings that fear turns to anger. Why is that? Because as you know, because I've talked about this endlessly and relentlessly, that fear is the desire to control outcomes. Fear is the primal desire for dominance. And if someone is afraid and not cooperating and not going along with what we want them to do, right? Their fear is getting in the way of our desire to control. Well, the desire to control is fear. And the more they're afraid, the more they trigger our desire to control them. So it's fear begets fear. And then the more they resist out of fear, the more they trigger our fear. And then that desire to control that is being denied us turns into anger. But if all this time you've been going through life just thinking that you have an anger management problem, you might not have been facing your demons at all. I've never gone to an anger management program. I mean, I don't know how accurate the movie is with Adam Sandler and Jack Nicholson called Anger Management. I don't know if there's any value in watching something like that, but someone who goes through a program and just learns how to control their anger, but doesn't get at the root cause, that they might have a desire to control and dominate circumstances and others, they might truly be possessed by fear. Someone can go through an entire anger management program and never confront the source of their anger. Have we really helped them? Have they really faced their demon? Or are they just treating symptoms? And they're just learning how to control and manage and subdue and repress the symptoms and never actually get to the kernel, to the heart, to the nucleus, to the source of that anger. But how would you know any of this? How would anybody know any of this? How would anybody know to do any of this? And the answer is you don't, and they wouldn't. Because the human mind is not qualified. It's not able, it's not capable. Because the mind is infected by all the money lenders and the livestock traders. That's where they exist, in the subconscious mind, and they come up and they bubble and they condition and they mess with and they interject and they subject our conscious mind to their whims. They get in the way. So you can't face your demons with your mind alone. You and I, mortal vessels, we're just the house of God and the butler. We alone can't do the work of the Christ. But there is something that we need to do before the Christ can do his work. We need to learn our lesson. We need to comprehend. We need to make ourselves open to receiving and seeing and being able to face consciously. We need to open the conduit of our conscious perception so that we can receive the spark of insight, of intuition, of comprehension, of discernment. And in that flash of comprehension, we can learn, we can know what it is that we need to know and learn the lesson that we need to learn, that the demon is there to teach us. And then once we've learned our lesson, then our Divine Mother can, that the feminine aspect of the Christ can come and eject that demon from our temple. This is the secret factor of facing demons, is that we are just a vehicle, we are just a vessel, but it's like a two-way street. And if that vessel is to be cleaned out, we first need to understand the nature of the pollution, the nature of the substance, of the muck, of the stuff that is caked on the inside of that vessel that's making it dirty and polluted and making it unfit to receive pure, clean water. Right? Because you don't serve fresh, clean beverages in dirty glasses or dirty vessels. You just don't do it. You got to clean them out. But how do you know how they need to be cleaned? Do they need to be cleaned with just rinsed out? Or does it need soap, or does it need lye, or does it need baking soda and vinegar? Like, how do you know? You have to know what's caked on the inside of that vessel, the nature of the pollution. That's our job, to observe, to be present, to be awake and aware. The facing the demons part, to be conscious when we face those demons, and to remember our Divine Mother, to remember the Christ, to remember that we're doing this because there's something we need to learn, and we're doing this because we are unqualified to eject this demon from our life. We have to learn our lesson first. And then when we've learned our lesson, the innermost Christ, our Divine Mother, can eject them from our temple. But it helps in the moment when you are confronting those demons, you're facing them in the moment, and you're observing what's happening in your mind, in your heart, in your body. If you can resist the temptation, for instance, if you have suddenly, you're overcome with the sudden and insatiable desire to, binge on something, binge on Netflix, or binge on Facebook, or, binge on a bag of potato chips, whatever it is. But we all know what that binging thing is, that instinct to binge is. If you can feel that, witness that, and witness what's happening in your mind, in your heart, in your body, what's going on, and how is it operating, and what are the buttons it's pushing, and what are the strings it's pulling. If in that moment you can remember your innermost intimate Christ, you can remember your divine mother, you can invoke the power of God. You can say, me, the mere mortal, alone may not be qualified or able or strong enough to repel and resist the song and dance and the hypnotic temptations of this demon. But my innermost being, my innermost intimate Christ, his will is stronger. And you can pray for strength. You can pray for help. You can pray and you can direct your willpower with that divine help and resist the urge to give in. But if you do give in, like in the moment you lose your temper and you snap at someone or whatever the case may be, because as I was describing earlier, some of these demons, they're terrorists and they jump you and they attacks really fast without warning, without preparation, and just you don't know what's happening, and oh my gosh, I shouldn't have said that, and you regret it moments later. So, but you can still observe and still gather the information in the moment. But then what do you do with that information that you've gathered, that you've observed? Because there's another part to this. Azazel is here and he says, hello, Azazel. Nice to have you. Nice to see you. What we can do at any time, but later in the day is often a good time, because the events of the day will still be relatively fresh in our mind. We can, later in the day, in the evening, we can lay down or sit in a comfortable chair or however it is that you prefer to meditate. And you can put yourself in a meditative state and you can replay the events in your mind's eye using the power of visualization and using the information that you gathered, the intelligence gathering that you did in the moment while the demon was possessing you, while the demon was interjecting, while the demon was pressing your buttons and pulling your levers and getting you to behave in ways that was uncharacteristic. You were witnessing the demon working through you. And you were observing what was happening in your mind, in your heart, in your body. All of that intelligence gathering, right? All of that surveillance, that self-observation, that mindfulness, all of that surveilled data. You bring it into that meditation and you retrospect and you play out the scenario, plugging in as much of the data that you observed, plugging in as much of the information as you can that you remember. And without indulging the ego again, without indulging the demon again, just being present and witnessing yourself. Like you can play it out like a movie where you're observing yourself from a third party objective position, as if you had a bird's eye view looking in on the scene, and watch yourself and watch and you can see the thoughts in your mind like in a thought bubble, like in a comic book, and the emotions and everything else, and you can see the activity in your body and the nervous system and everything else, and you can just as if you were like Superman using your X-ray vision, looking at yourself. There's any number of ways that you can play out that scenario from this what's the word that I'm looking for? Like a detective, like Sherlock Holmes, analyzing a crime scene. You're observing and you're going over what took place, what happened, how did it go down? And you're just playing it out and you're replaying it. And you are doing this in meditation with consciousness. You're not thinking about it. You're not trying to figure it out. You're not analyzing. You're not diagnosing intellectually what was being said, what was being done, how you were feeling, how you were behaving, how you were reacting, how others were reacting to you. This is not a mental activity. Your mind is serving a higher faculty, which is your consciousness. You're just replaying with as much information. Your mind is serving, right? Remember what we began with way at the beginning about being a butler, about being a servant. And the job of a servant, right, is to prepare the house, to get the house in order. So these events took place in your house earlier that day. Now you have to report to the master of the house what took place. So in meditation, that's really what you're doing, is you're ordering the events and you are recalling and you are presenting the events of the day to your consciousness. You're allowing your consciousness to observe objectively what took place. And you keep your mind out of it, you keep your thoughts, your emotions out of it. You're just playing the events over and over and over again without getting caught up in them. And you are allowing your consciousness to perform an act of metaphysical forensics, a forensic analysis by your higher self. And through the conduit of consciousness, because all of this is happening in meditation, you can receive the spark of comprehension. And you will receive the essential information that you need to know. But you receive that only if you've made your presentation, if you've given your report, if you've allowed the scenario to play out in meditation, and you've opened the conduit of consciousness, of free consciousness, so your higher self can do the forensic analysis on the information that you've collected, on the surveillance, on the intelligence that you've provided. And if that insight, that spark of insight comes, that comprehension, all of it makes sense now. And just in a moment, you'll be like, Eureka! And any demon, any ego that you need to face, and you achieve a comprehension on in this way, your innermost Christ, your divine mother, can eliminate that ego. But here's the key. As if the key to this key is that you don't do this once. We have 49 levels of the mind, 7 times 7. There's 49 levels of the mind that we have to do this on. We have to face the same demon over and over and over and over again and comprehend how it works on all these different levels of the mind. So this is an activity that we'll have to repeat, which is why we're constantly suffering from our demons. They're constantly rearing their head and they're constantly getting in our way. They're constantly messing up our life. Because it's the only way we can learn our lesson. It's the only way we can comprehend them is by having an opportunity to study them in the wild, to observe them in the wild. Just like a spy, on a mission, on a surveillance mission, or just like a nature photographer or some biologist preparing a nature documentary. These nature these biologists, whatever, they go and they live in the wild for months and months at a time with with wolves or with lions or with birds or monkeys or pandas or whatever it is that they're studying, right? And they live out, then they put either they're intense or whatever, or if they're like Jane Goodall, then she goes and she tries to make friends with the chimpanzee troop or whatever, tries to get inside their heads, tries to understand them. But the point is that we have to observe, we have to do the work. We have to face our demons and recognize that their true nature is on a level that our intellect can't access. The mind cannot go. The conscious mind cannot penetrate into the subconscious mind. That's why it's the subconscious mind, because our mind cannot go there. When we go there when we dream. We go there when we take substances and we're taken into the subconscious mind, the lunar astral plane. And then maybe you'll get lucky and have a bad trip and see one of your demons. Or maybe you'll have a nightmare and you'll confront one of your demons in a nightmare. And you'll get lucky that way. But barring that, the only, I've used the analogy of Jaws many times, right? The great white shark. And how in the movie Jaws, one of the key plot devices of the film is that they have to shoot harpoons into the shark that are attached to these barrels. And the barrels, of course, float. And the plot device is that they have to shoot enough barrels into the shark to prevent it from diving. They want to keep it at the surface. Why? For obvious reasons. Because it's only if the shark is at the surface, it's the only way they can kill it. If it dives deep, then it's out of range. They can't. It's gone. It goes with the, a great white shark goes back into its domain. Well, then forget about it. You're not hunting a great white shark underwater. Forget about it. You got to keep it on the surface. And this is why when we go through life, our Divine Mother orchestrates circumstances and people to come into our lives that trigger our demons, that trigger our defects and vices, our egos, that trigger us. And we find ourselves in these loops of repeated behaviors and that afterwards, that we regret afterwards and say, oh, what possessed me to do that again? Or I did it again, or I did it again. Well, you keep doing it. You keep repeating it over and over and over again because you're not learning your lesson. And when you do learn your lesson on one level, then from that point forward, you're going to be confronting the same demon, but at a different level. It's going to be a little bit different, maybe a little bit more intense, maybe a little bit more severe, because remember, you have to comprehend that demon on all the different levels of the mind. You have to face it on all those different levels because the demon exists on all those different levels of the mind. But your mind, your conscious mind, can't go and penetrate into your subconscious mind. But your consciousness can. And you know this is true because you can dream. And more importantly, if you can lucid dream, if you can project into the astral plane and be awake in your dreams, then you know your consciousness can exist in the lunar astral plane. And if you can project into the lunar astral plane, you can ask to see any one of your demons. Just as you can ask to see your divine mother, you can ask to see your innermost being. You can ask to see yourself as you truly are. Just be prepared because you might not like what you see. But the point is the consciousness is the thing. The secret to facing our demons is who is facing them. Who is doing the confrontation? Who is doing the ejecting? And who is just the conduit? Who is just the one that gives the report, that gathers the intelligence and gives the report? Likewise, if you want to use another analogy of the surveillance analogy, right? Like James Bond, right? Or any other kind of CIA assassin or something like that, right? The movie always begins with a briefing, right? And the agent is given a briefing, and that briefing includes a whole bunch of intelligence, right? Here's the satellite photos. Here's the ground reconnaissance. Here's your contact in the country. Here's what we know. Here's what we think. Here's what we've been able to gather. Here's all the intelligence. Here's the files. Study it. And once you've got all that information down, then go and do the mission. The people doing the intelligence gathering are not the same agents who go and do the mission, right? The people doing the surveillance and intelligence gathering are not James Bond. But everything they do serves up and reports to James Bond what he needs to know so that he can go and eliminate the target. Right? Our innermost James Bond, our innermost intimate Christ, is the one who ejects the moneylenders from the temple. But he has to know that they're there, and he has to know what they're doing and how they're doing it. We, in a sense, get ourselves out of the way of ourselves so that our self can come and do the confrontation. Because it's the God power, our mystical power, the God of our being, that has the ability and capability of cleansing the house of God. But he has to have our permission and our cooperation to do so, because he will not act against our will, and he will not act if we haven't learned the lesson that we needed to learn. He will not act precipitously or prematurely. This is the very real scientific, metaphysical scientific process at play, which is altogether not mentioned when people say facing your demons, or when people talk about, oh, doing shadow work, and I have to do my shadow work. You see, people are wholly misinformed and somewhat delusional when they think I'm going to do my shadow work and I'm going to overcome my defects and vices and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. No, you're not. No, you're not. You can't. You're just a mortal vessel. You don't do anything. You can't accomplish anything. Your intellect can't go into the subconscious mind. What are you going to clean out there? How are you going to clean? What are you going to accomplish? All you're going to accomplish is you're going to give those demons an opportunity and a reason to reconfigure themselves and reorient themselves in such a way that you can now believe that you faced your demons and done your shadow work and overcome your demons, and now go trotting on through life believing that you're awakened and you're enlightened and that you've purified your temple, you've cleansed your temple, and now you're going to be walking around with this huge head full of mystic pride, and those demons will have just reoriented themselves and reconfigured themselves like transformers into a new versions of themselves, and you'll be entirely delusional. You'll not have learned your lesson in any way, shape, or form, because you will have left your divine mother and your innermost being and the mystical power of the God of your being out of the picture. It's the same reason why the 12-step program in AA, it only works if those who are suffering from addictions invoke the divine. It's only if they invoke the power of God does the 12-step program work. It does not work in a secular context, because no mortal has the power or ability to overcome a demon. Period. That's not how this works. A mortal is a vessel. A mortal is that which is possessed by demons. We are, this is like saying, I'm trying to think of a suitable analogy using parasites. Think of a dog that has heartworm, right? The dog that has heartworm, the dog is not capable of ridding itself of the heartworm. And our demons are just like parasites. And they know us better than we know ourselves. And they know where to hide, and they know where to, the buttons to press and the levers to pull. And the mind and the heart and the body are their playground. That's their domain. There's no way that you're going to use your intellect to figure out and overcome and face and conquer and eject a demon. There's no way. Why? Because the mind, the intellect, that's their turf. That's their playground. Only the superior faculty of consciousness can truly penetrate the truth and nature of our demons, can truly confront and face those demons and see them for what they truly are. And only the power of our innermost intimate Christ and our divine mother, the feminine aspect of the Christ, because the Christ is androgynous, but the feminine aspect of our innermost intimate Christ, she has the ability to incinerate and transmute our defects and vices, our demons, and release the consciousness that they have enslaved, and free us from their influence. Right? Only the Christ can eject the money lenders from the temple. That's what this story is about, right? Jesus doesn't send his apostles. Remember, Jesus had apostles. He had disciples. He had a band of 12 guys and gals, guys and gal, right? Mary Magdalene. But he could have gone, they could have gone in there, all of them together as a group. Would have made more sense. Yeah. But the Bible story isn't written that way, right? It's not written that way for a reason. Jesus singularly takes on an entire mob of moneylenders and livestock traders for a reason, and that reason is to illustrate the metaphysical science of who is qualified and who is capable of cleansing our temple of that which desecrates it. This is the secret key of facing our demons. You won't hear psychologists talk about this. They'll say, face your demons, but they won't. But if they leave this out, just like last week, we were talking about manifesting and affirmations. So you leave God out. You know, I loved, who was it? Wayne Dyer used to use this expression. You edged God out. EGO. If you edge God out, right, all you're left with ego, and ego cannot eject the moneylenders from your temple. Ego cannot confront demons. Your ego, your I, your false self, your adversary is the amalgamation of all of your demons. There's no, it's like I said, it's all you're going to accomplish is an elaborate bait and switch. And they're going to reconfigure themselves. And this is like when people do their quote shadow work and the integration of the shadow, and they do it the wrong way. And they're integrating their demons. They're integrating their demons and vices into a new self. Well, there's a word for that. It's called awakening negatively. It's called awakening as a black magician. It's called awakening as a demon. This is what happens when you face your demons and do your shadow work, and you forget your innermost. You forget your divine mother. You forget the Christ, the mystic power of the God of your being. This is the secret to facing your demons, is being humble and recognizing that I'm just a mortal. Who the hell do I think I am, thinking that I can defeat a demon, that I can face my demons, that I can eradicate my demons? It's nonsense. It's a tragedy. And just as the wrong application of affirmations strengthens ego, so too the wrong application of facing your demons, doing it the wrong way, forgetting who is capable and qualified to do so, you're going to end up reconfiguring the very demons you're trying to face into a new version of yourself that you will be convinced is better than what you were. So again, just to sum up, observe yourself, remember yourself, remember your divine mother, meditate. put yourself into a state whereby you can cooperate and participate and witness a conscious forensic analysis of your demons in activity, in operation. And then you get to witness how they go about doing what they do in your mind, in your heart, in your body. And with one eye in and one eye out, you do that surveillance in the moment. And you're aware of your surroundings. You're aware of the triggering person or events or circumstances. And all of this you're doing so that in meditation later you can repeat, you can replay for your consciousness to allow your consciousness to perform the forensic analysis, not intellectually, not mentally, but consciously. And then to receive the spark of comprehension. And that you need to repeat this process over and over and over again and comprehend that demon on all 49 levels of the mind. And it's not just one demon we have to face, right? So we have many defects and vices. We have many foibles and Achilles heels that we face. So this is a lifelong work. This is not something that we do one weekend and then we're done. It's not something we do for a few weeks and we're done. It's just this ongoing process of self-observation, self-remembering, and meditation. But the secret key that whenever you hear anybody in the future, you'll be listening for this now. When people talk about facing their demons, or telling other people to face your demons or whatever, if they say it in any kind of secular context, and they leave out, right? They edge God out. It's just more ego. It's just another trick of the Black Lodge, and another trap. Because remember, it is possible to awaken negatively. It is possible to create a new construct, a new self with integrated demons, integrated egos, and feel like we've been reborn, born again. But what's been born again is just a Frankensteinian abomination. We don't want that, right? That's actually a great analogy. You know, the ship from Pirates of the Caribbean, Davy Jones's ship, his haunted souls there, part of the crew, part of the ship. They literally become part of the ship. You can think about, use that visualization and say that's what people are doing, facing their demons and so-called conquering their demons, owning their demons themselves with their ego. They're becoming like Davy Jones, and their vessel is becoming like Davy Jones' ship. And they're all those egos, all those demons that they think they're confronting and facing are now part of the crew and part of the ship. So it's just worthwhile to contemplate all this and meditate on this as you go forward, because this is the missing link, right? The secret hidden key to facing our demons. Because without our Divine Mother, without the innermost intimate Christ, we're lost. Forget it. We don't have the tools. We don't have the ability. We don't have the power to eradicate demons. It's just like, remember, even in the church, even if you talk to an exorcist will tell you that he's not the one that performs the exorcism. He's not. He does not have the power to perform an exorcism. He is just a servant. He is just there. He just facilitates the process, and it's entirely a divine force. It's entirely God. It's entirely Christ or one of the archangels, which members who are a part of the Christ that perform the exorcism, right? So, and same with people who heal, faith healers, divine healers. True divine healers will tell you they do not do the healing. And this is a theme that runs across an entire spectrum. Like true authors, true artists, true musicians will tell you that they don't write the music. Right? I don't give these live streams. I don't write the books. And this is really the key to everything, the key to humanity that's been lost. And not only has it been lost, in the void that's been left, this humanity is now grasping at AI to plug the hole. Anyway, but that's a talk for another day. That's a subject for another day. Does anybody have any questions or comments about today, about what we talked about today? By the way, in a very real sense, this is what Jesus meant when he said, "It's only through me that you come to heaven and the forgiveness of sins." Right? We talk about the forgiveness of sins, but then we have to talk about the eradication of sin. It's only the Christ that has the ability to do that. Right? But it's not belief in Jesus that makes that happen. It's working with the Christ and learning our lesson and allowing the Christ to do its to bring its fire, the fire of fires and the light of lights, to our own darkness and to eradicate that darkness and replace it with the light. Only the Christ can do that. Benjamin says, in the ancient world, the temple wasn't just a building, it was a spiritual center of society and shaped how people understood God, community, and the meaning of life. Today, our culture is shaped far more by commerce, efficiency, and material concerns. So many people view life through a business mindset rather than a sense of holiness. How can we overcome this conditioning we've absorbed since birth? On one level, well, the first thing I would say is your first part of your comment. In the ancient world, the temple wasn't just a building, it was the spiritual center of society and shaped how people understood God, community, and the meaning of life. That was as much of a problem back then as having the church as the center of spirituality is today. Because that's not what the temple really was. It became a spiritual center of society and shaped, how people understood God and the community and the meaning of life. It became that, but it degenerated into that. what it was when it was built was a place which expressed in stone and in architecture, not in macrocosm, but in a small macrocosm or a larger microcosm. It was an intermediary space which was a larger projection of the temple of man. And there's actually a book called The Temple of Man by Delubitz. I can't remember his first name, but the author's name is Delubitz, and it's all about the Temple of Luxor in Egypt. And he shows in diagrams and in his explanation how the Temple of Luxor, its different parts represent the different parts of a human being. So it's like if you take a human being and if you could put a light in a human being that was powerful enough and you cranked up that light to maximum and then somehow could capture in stone the projection of that man, you get the Temple of Luxor, and Luxor means light. So what the temple was then was a space where individual temples of God could come together and congregate and share and worship together in a space which was a reflection of the perfected temple, the idealized, perfected human being. But it was never the focal point. It was just a place for individuals to focus. Because the focal point is always within. And it's always been within. Remember, there is nothing out there. There is no out there. No one who has ever built a temple of the ancient world thought that there was anything out there. Everything out there was there to serve that which was within. So it was a mirror, it was a tool, it was a space of love, it was a space of contemplation. It's let's make a version, a virtual reality simulation of the human psyche, of the human temple, but let's make it out of stone. We'll carve it out of stone, which is solid, which has a permanence to it. It's the closest thing that we have in the material world that can mimic or mirror or begin to capture the strength, the solidity, and the eternity and immortality of the supernal worlds. Right? Look at the Great Pyramid of Giza. Look at these other Stonehenge and these other temples from the ancient world that after 2, 3, 4, 5, 10,000 years, they're still standing, or at least their foundations are still standing. Right? So that's why the ancients built out of stone. And it was there, everything was there to serve and focus the consciousness to our inner self, so that when the inside of those temples were adorned with beautiful scriptures and inspiring scriptures, or the severity and mercy of love and prayers and glorifications and in the Temple of Luxor, you have all the hieroglyphs and all the edicts of the Temple of Luxor, which is basically like the equivalent of the Ten Commandments, but there's like, over 100 of them. Um, it was all like to take the individuals and immerse them in a holy, sacred space that was entirely focused on spiritual development and was there to help focus the mind and the consciousness on the supernal worlds and on the innermost intimate Christ. Now, that's the true purpose of temples and churches. I mean, I don't even think a Catholic or a Protestant or any Christian would reasonably argue that a church or even a cathedral. I mean, I went to La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, and the enormity of it all, and it's colossal and everything else, and it's incredible. It's absolutely, breathtaking in so many ways. But rest assured, all of it was there for one purpose and one purpose alone: to strengthen my individual relationship with my own innermost intimate Christ. Any purpose beyond that is superfluous. Because any house of God is there to shelter and support a true house of God. We are the true house of God. There's this parable. This is one of the parables from the Bible. Anytime any two people come together in my name, there shall I be. What does that mean? That means any two people coming together form the two pillars of a terrestrial house of God. You don't need stone. You don't need brick. You don't need anything. You just need two pillars. And guess what? We have those two pillars within us. Ida and Pingala, the masculine and feminine energetic channels of the human being. We are all a house of God. You cannot tell me that when you kneel down to pray in your house, that your house does not in that moment become a church. Or that when, no matter where you are, you can be out in the woods, you kneel down and pray, or you sit to meditate, that the canopy of trees are not now a cathedral in God's name, and you are a priest in that cathedral. So the second part of your the second part of the first part of your thing, it wasn't just a building, it was the spiritual center of society and shaped how people understood God, community, and the meaning of life. This is a degeneration of what the temple really is. And this is what, when religions degenerate from mysticism into idolatry. So why did I spend 10 minutes talking about the first part of this? In order to answer the second part. How do you get over all of these conditioned material concerns and commerce and efficiency and business mindset, and rather than a sense of holiness? How do we overcome this conditioning we've absorbed since birth? Remember that you are a house of God, that you are a church of one, and that you are its priest and its congregation. And the holiness that you seek was never in any building. It's within you. And that there is no out there, and that all of that mechanicity, the commerce, the efficiency, the material concerns, and everything else, those are all the money lenders and the livestock traders. and that they are a reflection of the moneylenders and the livestock traders within your own psychology. The mechanical, intellectual, dogmatic beliefs. And so you face your demons and you become the living embodiment. You play out in your own life, in your own psychology, in your own heart, the drama that is being shown in this painting behind me. You observe yourself, you remember yourself, your divine mother, your innermost intimate Christ, and you eradicate the mechanical, transactional, materialist, empirical tendencies and conditioning and egos that are operating in your mind, in your heart, and in your body. And you allow your innermost intimate Christ. You study them, you observe them, you give that surveillance and that intelligence to your consciousness to perform its forensic analysis. You receive the insight, the comprehension that you needed to learn your lesson, and then you allow the Christ to come and eject them from your temple. That's how. Right? How can we overcome the conditioning you can't overcome it. Because you're coming at it with a mind that's conditioned. So you by yourself can't overcome it, but the Christ can. But the Christ won't overcome it without your participation, without your cooperation, and without your consent, and without your active participation in the surveillance and observation and opening the channel to receive the insight, to receive the learning, to learn the lessons that you need to learn, to be deconditioned, to have your temple cleansed. Only the Christ can do that. But he will if you let him. But I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for some kind of renewal of churches being the center of spiritual community and God and all that, because anything like that's happening and people are doubling down on their religiosity and idolatry, and that's why we all have to do this work for ourselves with the help of our divine mother and higher self, because you can't rely on anybody out there, certainly no organization or government or anything else. I mean, it's just Benjamin says, thank you for that wonderful answer, sir. I actually have Schwaller de Lubitz's the Temple in Man, though I haven't read it in full yet. It really is true that the kingdom of God is within, not something external. In a sense, the two pillars are the two great commandments: love God in spirit and truth, and love others as yourself. And the temple of the Holy Spirit is our body. Yeah, so yeah, you're right. Schwaller de Lubitz. That's why I couldn't remember his first name, because what kind of name is Schwaller? Schwaller de Lubitz, the temple in it's a temple in man or the temple of man? You're right, it's a temple in man. Um, but yeah, but when you realize that and say, yeah, all those churches and all those, I mean, I've felt it's funny because there's this tiny, tiny little church in this part of Hungary called the Alföld, which is, you could easily translate it as heartland, and it is the heartland of Hungary. It is the fertile agricultural part of Hungary. rich black volcanic soil. And I in this one little village is this tiny, tiny little church. Um, you go in there and it's got a wooden altar and 4 pews, like literally two rows of pews. Like when I say this, it's the size of a room. Like, I mean, but the walls were like 3 meters thick, and they had like little slits that went all the way halfway, and then there was this little sliver of amber um, that were the so-called stained glass windows. It was the walls, and it had a portcullis in addition to the iron doors and stuff. In other words, it was not just a church, it was like a safe room. It was a fortified mini keep. And I can only imagine what it was like when the Ottoman Turks were rampaging over the Hungarian countryside, because the Ottoman Turks occupied Hungary. Many of the Crusades were actually fought on Hungarian soil. A lot of people don't know this. And I could just imagine the villagers going to their little church and closing the iron doors and dropping the portcullis and being in this little haven, this little with these 3 meter thick stone walls, and just waiting out. There was nothing to burn. There was no way to burn it. And I remember visiting this church and seeing how just the fragments of the frescoes that were on the outside of the church that of course had been destroyed by the Ottomans, but there were little fragments here and there. And I remember just sitting in that church and just being absolutely overwhelmed, and the tears rolling down my face as I comprehended the faith that countless generations of people had placed in that building to save them in a very practical way, and how this little tiny little church survived over 1,000 years of nonstop warfare and conflict and everything else. And it was one of the it was just this it was one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had in any church or any cathedral anywhere in the world. And I'm talking Notre Dame, La Sagrada Familia. It doesn't, it didn't matter. This tiny little one room church with 4 pews had more faith accumulated in that space and in its walls than dozens of cathedrals that I had visited up until that point, including the Basilica and in Vienna and the cathedrals in Budapest. I mean, it was quite phenomenal, and it was the most humble little, like, nothing burger of a little tiny little church. It was barely a church. A typical Catholic would have called it a chapel. So, as far as buildings are concerned, I have it's always been, they serve us, not the other way around. It's not us who should be bowing down in awe at, the building. It's the building needs to get us in awe of ourselves and of that which is within us. That's what their job is. Benjamin says, that small church you mentioned reminded me of a verse that speaks to the idea that a large congregation isn't necessary to experience the presence of God. For where two or three are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. Precisely. But doesn't matter. People will be people, and the forces of devolution are there, and the mechanical materialist, more is better attitude just, can't fight that. So you end up with Joel Osteen's 100,000 person mega church. So does anybody have any other questions or comments before we before we wrap it up for today? Really, today and last week, the theme has been um, consciously inviting the God power of our being back into our life, and consciously stepping aside and allowing ourselves to accept our place in the scheme of things, and allowing that which is equipped and which is qualified to do what it can and what it should in our lives. And allowing that and accepting that and participating and cooperating in it. Because remember what a human being is. Manas, and being. The earthen matrix for the divine mind of being. That's what it means to be a human being. An earthen matrix for the divine mind of being. Now, you can pick a different word. An earthen vessel for the divine mind of being. An earthly vehicle for the divine mind of being. But that divine mind is consciousness and the will of God as it's expressing through our innermost essence. And we are the earthen vessel. I mean, that goes without saying, right? We are the vehicle. We are the 3D spacesuit. We are the Iron Man suit, complete with an onboard AI called our personality and our mind. But if we truly want to be a superhero, when we want to be able to accomplish heroic things, we have to make room in our Iron Man suit for our innermost Tony Stark, our creator, who is powered in his heart by the arc reactor, the source of the light and the source of energy. That's the Christ. He is the true hero. He is the true superhero. And we are just his creation. We are just his 3D spacesuit. So he can be the superhero here in 3D space. Benjamin says, I've learned a great deal today. Thank you, sir. I'll certainly keep these thoughts in mind during my Holy Week contemplations. Well, very good. And yeah, Holy Week is fast approaching. So thank you for reminding me of that. Oh, goodness. Oh, I've had a lot on my mind now. This with preparing this house for the market and everything else. Anyway, listen, thank you all. If there are no more questions or comments, I want to thank you all for spending your Sunday afternoon with me as usual. And have a great week in the coming week ahead. And I hope to see you here next week. And until then, as always, inferential peace. Take care, everyone.